Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of songwriting, chat with some of the most exciting artists in the world, and explore the stories behind their songs. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and thank you for joining us. Our guest this week on the podcast is Kneecap. The Belfast rap trio have become one of the most thrilling and provocative acts to emerge from Ireland in the last number of years, known for their sharp, politically charged lyricism, chaotic energy, and unapologetic celebration of the Irish language. Since forming, they've built a fiercely devoted following on both sides of the Irish border and well beyond, credited with bringing the Irish language into mainstream culture in a way that few artists ever have before them. Their self-titled film earned widespread critical acclaim and introduced them to an entirely new global audience, while their infamous Coachella set last year cemented their status as one of the most electrifying live acts in the world. And it generated plenty of headlines along the way as well. Now, no strangers to controversy, the trio have been as prominent in the news for their outspoken activism as they have for their music. They are never shying away from using their platform to make noise about the things that matter most to them. Last week marked the release of their brand new album, FENIAN, and it arrives in the middle of what has been one of the band's most intense and extraordinary periods yet. It's a record that captures Kneecap at their most fearless, doubling down on everything that makes them so compelling while pushing their sound into bold new directions. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Chara to unpack everything. We chat about FENIAN, the making of the album, and what it was like recording in the middle of one of the band's wildest and most full-on stretches. We talk about his own introduction to music, what first drew him in and sparked his interest in making it, and we also dig into something close to the heart of everything that Kneecap do. We discuss the importance of native languages and why that thread runs so deeply throughout their work. Now, we want to say a massive thank you to Ash for her help with today's episode and remind everyone that FENIAN, the brand new album from Kneecap, is out right now. You'll find links in today's show notes on where you can buy the record from, stream the band's music, and follow their socials for all their upcoming tour dates. While you are in the show notes, please make sure you subscribe to This Song Is Yours and go and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We would really love it if you did. It does help us out and it keeps you up to date with new episodes, guests, and everything else that we've got going on. Now let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Chara from Kneecap.
I'll huff up, blow your house up. It's just a being and we and douse that. Send the crowd, get it doused up. Cause your task bubble is what we're about. Cock sword cunt hard after me. Cut the more out of them dastardly. You weak green fiend, get bastard G.
Please welcome to This Song Is Yours from Kneecap. It is Chara. Hello, sir. How are we?
I'm not too bad, mate. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you for giving some of us your time. I'm very excited that we've got an opportunity to chat to you about a brand new Kneecap album that is out right now for people to listen to. It is titled FENIAN, for those who are listening. I'm hoping I pronounced that correct. It's a perfect follow-up to Fine Art. I'd love to know, I guess, to start with, how are things in Camp Kneecap? How are you guys feeling with a new album coming out and with all this kind of, the machine starting back up again?
Yeah, no, great. Like we obviously we did Fine Art and we were very, we were very proud of it, and it did its job very well, and we're all so grateful to Tatla, and we're over the moon. And I think just with the second album, obviously, I'm sure you understand, obviously with working on music, the second album it's very important. Obviously, you have your whole life to write your first album, and then you have like a year to write your second one. You know what I mean? So and the second one needs to be better. So there's always a lot of pressure on groups. Second album syndrome, as they put it. Luckily with us, it was fortunate and unfortunate that there was so much things that might have happened. Do you know what I mean? There's so much things that have happened just last year that meant we had plenty to draw from. Do you know what I mean? Whereas a lot of bands maybe don't have certain experiences. So it was fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. But yeah, it's a much more mature feel. I think the boys are getting a bit older now, and we wanted to, because I think with the Irish language in particular, and maybe with hip hop from Ireland, I think it's very easily categorized as parody and not to be taken too seriously. So I think with this one, we wanted to, kind of prove that we at least know roughly what we're doing. And obviously that's big thanks to Dan. Big thanks to Dan Curry. He was absolutely incredible, and it was an absolute privilege to work with him.
Look, I think you've done an absolutely fine job of doing that. This album is, it has elements of party on it, but there is definitely kind of lots of different tones, different sonic places that you're kind of going with it. And with that being said, I feel that it doesn't really, at no point did I feel that it was purely a party album. I feel that it does cover a lot of ground in terms of what you're able to be able to express, to be able to say. You kind of touched on it just for a second there, that you obviously have had a busy 12 to 24 months, let's say, since the last record coming out. And it was one thing that I was a little bit surprised at, because when I went back and had a look, I thought, oh, far out. It's only been 2 years. As you said, lots of bands don't usually have the luck of having so much on to be able to write about. You guys have had a documentary. There's been other things going on with the band. How did you manage to get into the studio with all those other things going on and be able to write? Do you guys write on the road, or was it something that you really put time aside to be able to go and sit back down and write and make music?
Yeah, so I mean, what happened was at the start of last year, we had an album finished. We had done an album, and for a cocktail of reasons, it just didn't feel right. There was plenty of good songs on it, but I think it's just as an album, I think maybe we put ourselves under too much pressure, or whatever the reasons were, it just didn't work. And we had to, it's called, you have to kill your babies. Unfortunately, you just have to, you just knew the moment wasn't right, and we had to just drop it all. And that's whenever we started again then, for around 7 weeks we spent with Dan Carey. We spent around 7 weeks. And in about 3.5 weeks into that, we obviously had to stop and go to the magistrate's court. There was a court case on. So I think with a lot of bands, maybe whenever they're creating an album, they get to kind of lock themselves away for 2 or 3 months with no kind of outside influence or whatever. We had to go to court, and we also had a Wembley Arena show and stuff. So we had a lot of influences. But I think what happens is, because we've been so busy, Sam, in the last couple of years, you kind of almost don't process things properly. And then what happens is when you get to the studio, it's almost you get into this, you can go through your subconscious folder almost, and you kind of process things that have happened. So it's very therapeutic to us in a way. And obviously it was a great space to work with Dan. So as you said, the machine's back and running now, and we can't wait. We can't wait to be on stage playing new songs. I think we've been playing the same songs for long enough.
I know that there's a lot of excitement around a number of the live dates that you guys have in store. I think, having a very quick look, there were dates across Europe and the UK in May, and then pretty much through to November. With the new album coming out, do you already know what's maybe a bit of a favourite for yourselves? Are there things that already stand out from that set list and from the album that you're like, oh, this is gonna fucking go off?
Yeah, do you know what? Not really. There's a couple of ones I like. And I'm unsure. Do you know what? We have a rehearsal start in this week, so I'll have a better grasp. You may have got me a day or two early on that one, but I'll have a better grasp of it by the end of this week anyway. Look,
that's totally fair. Probably a question I would usually save for the end of the conversation, but because we're talking about touring. And look, even a hint of something, can we maybe expect to see you guys down in Australia at any point in support of the record?
Of course, so we would love to. I think what happened was we've obviously not really applied for certain visas, obviously because the court case was kind of hanging on. We just didn't want to, we haven't applied for anything. I think a lot of the media may have got it wrong that we were refused visas for here or whatever. That's just not the case. I just thought we played it safe and didn't apply for any visas. But again, no member of Kneecap has been convicted of any crime in any country ever. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to play everywhere. And we obviously have such a big fan base in Australia. Absolutely loved it there. In March last year, was it March or April last year maybe? We absolutely loved it. So we will absolutely be there as soon as possible. Same goes to Aotearoa as well.
Look, love to absolutely hear that. As mentioned, that March tour, what was it, the Fed Square gig, I think that it's clear that there is a clear affiliation for Kneecap in Australia, and with fans loving the music that you guys make. Yeah, let's have a talk about FENIAN, this new album. Having a listen, sonically, you're covering, there's elements of rave house music, there's trance, there's punk music, there's hip hop. Is it a conversation that you guys have prior to going into the studio on what you want to do to progress the sound? Or is it just organically you may be listening to different things, or that it's what comes out in the moment in the studio?
Yeah, it's a mix of all. It's a mix of all of that. I think what happened is you had Dan Carey, who's obviously we started a few years ago on GarageBand with a drum loop. We're by no means were we established high quality musicians, and we have gotten bigger. we are like the crowds and stuff has developed much faster than the rate that we were able to create tracks and beats and stuff. So we've had the outsource for the last few years. Dan Carey was the perfect find for the second album because of, we're very simplistic. We're very simplistic in our approach. We're very simplistic in, I think a lot of hip hop can be very simple because you almost need those, like, like almost like a metronome so you can rap in between it. So whenever we had Dan Carey bring in his absolute, like, his outlandish, like, musical, like, it's genius. Like, it's genius to watch. His complexity mixed with our simplicity, we just meshed perfectly. And we just found that sweet spot where it's musical enough that it's a real development for us, but also keeping, the simplistic approach that Kneecap normally has.
With something like that, is there ideas that, because I know for a lot of musicians, and especially a lot of hip hop and R&B musicians, that, as you said, it's kind of more on the spot, that there are certain things that things will kind of change within a second in the studio. Are there little, I guess the old school version of it would have been notebooks. Maybe these days it's, the Notes app, of like certain topics that you want to talk about, like ideas for songs? Or again, is that done once you hear the sonics that Dan's building and creating in the studio? Do you then get an idea for maybe what you want to talk about?
Yeah, sorry, I'm with you. I went off on a wee tangent in that last one there. That's I'm like, I can be like that, especially when I'm a bit hungover. But no, as you're saying, yeah. So the way that we kind of approached the songs with Dan was, because we started from scratch again. So day one we got in, that we would have, like, as you said, there's all different genres on it. So we are in the different, like, we're not like strictly hip hop or strictly whatever. We listen to all sorts, and that comes out in the music. So I think when Dan would start creating a track that we would give like rough ideas, we wanted this kind of sound, or maybe have like a track you would play and be like, we want it roughly this sound or whatever it was, drums or BPMs or whatever, and he would get started. And then we would write as he is molding the track. So it was very organic, like almost that the lyrics were developing at the exact same time and the exact same rate as the track was developing. So it was almost like it was all parallel to each other, which I've never worked like that before, but I think it worked very well with Dan.
It has produced.
So it was very on the spot there, yeah, very, very much so.
No. Like it is an incredible album, and I think that you can even tell that there are moments of I don't know what the proper wording for it would be. I think sometimes you have musicians, regardless of genre, where you can tell that an idea has been sat with for a while, or that it's not current. But as you said, Kneecap has been in the news cycle for a multitude of reasons, music and non-music. And with that, I feel like there's almost like an energy to the album in a way. You can tell that there's an excitement, that there's a liveness to it as well.
Thanks, man.
Wondering whether you might be able to indulge me a little bit. I really loved, and I'm not saying this simply because I am talking to you, but I really loved Big Bad Mo. I thought that track, great track. Wondering whether you might be able to share maybe where that track kind of was built from, or what inspired it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like Big Bad Mo, that's not something that you go away pensive, philosophical and write. Do you know what I mean? That's just a straight up, like, I just came, like, when the track was happening, I don't even know where it came from. It's one of them ones, you almost black out sometimes, and then you listen back to it the next day, you're like, I barely remember even writing that. I think Big Bad Mo was one of those tracks. But we did have the idea. There's a song called Let Me Love You for Tonight by Chara. Mm-hmm. Like, classic dance tune. But that has like the wee thing at the start, like boom, 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 like that, almost like the house chords. And I think in Big Bad Mo it breaks into that at one point. Boom, 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 boom. But yeah, so that was literally Dan just being a genius. I was like, I have this idea where I want like a wee piano, like a house chord break. And that's like a fraction of that song. And he just took that and went and built that whole song. Dan Carey went to our gig in Wembley. And that's whenever he was like, right, okay, I understand maybe that we're not doing like maybe small rooms anymore, that he wants to make an album that's going to fill out arenas. And Big Bad Mo was kind of one of the ones that birthed from that. But it's not a philosophical one. Don't read too much into Big Bad Mo. That's just unless you take something philosophical from it, then by all means I meant it.
Look, we are a songwriting podcast primarily, and we do like to kind of go through that. But Big Bad Mo was like something that after having a few listens to the album, it just kind of jumped out as something that again had that kind of exciting energy to it. So I think it might not inspire any long form theses, but still a great track on the record.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thanks very much. I think there's ones like I think the more songwriting came into ones like Cocaine Hill and stuff like that was ones that were that was one actually that was one I had wrote my verse before. I wrote that years ago actually. I'm not a great sleeper. So that was something that came from years ago, and we get in, and Dan Carey had showed us this track, and he was like, I've been sitting on this track for years, and it's just never really worked. And he played it, and it was, I think his was on 70. It was like a 70 BPM, and I had wrote that to 140, so it was perfect. It was literally just double speed, and I listened to it, and I was like, that's perfect. I recorded that verse on the I think the first day that we met Dan. I recorded that, and we were like, right, we're on to something here. I think that was one of the first verses we wrote or we recorded, and I think it was one of the last songs we finished. I don't know why. I think it worked so well to start. We were like, that's gonna work. We'll come back to that, and then we just towards the end we were like, remember that we did at the start. We went back to it, and then we had this idea for John Martin, the John Martin Cocaine Hill sample, but we actually got Really Pete to sing it and stuff. Anyway, it's just one of them songs that could have very well been forgotten or whatever, but it worked instantly, and then almost forgot about it, and then we circled back to it at the end, and it's my favorite on the album.
It's an incredible track. I'm glad that it was remembered at the end. Just then, when you said that it'd been something that you'd been sitting on for a while, as mentioned, primarily a songwriting podcast here on our end. What do you remember? What was it? Or can you share with us what originally got you into like writing lyrics and kind of making music of your own before Kneecap?
Do you know, I used to get this question a lot when we were starting, and it was only when I started doing interviews for Kneecap that I realised that in primary school I used to write raps all the time, but I had completely forgot about that. Like me and a few other lads in primary school, we used to do it all the time, and that was just something I'd almost forgot about. Went and played sports or whatever it was, and then started doing interviews again. I was like, I used to do that all the time actually, but I had no interest in it. But once I started growing up, for some reason, maybe fell out with it a bit or whatever. But I've always just kind of been interested in that kind of aspect of music, songwriting. Whenever I was listening to it, I've always been a music fan, and I've always been very like maybe what people do with certain lyrics of ours that you really read into it a lot, and maybe that songwriter like Noel Gallagher or whatever, just he wasn't even thinking, you know what I mean? But for some reason, it resonated with you, even though it was a throwaway comment for him. I feel like we get that a lot. But from I started Kneecap, I've really, really enjoyed it. I've really kind of I've always, as I said at the start, I don't want to fall. I want to make sure we don't fall into, you know, that because it's in the Irish language, or maybe that was a different interview, that it's parody. You know, it gets it all the time. That just because something's in the Irish language, that it's not to be taken too seriously. And I think once we started with Kneecap, and once we were like obviously getting those kind of that people thought we were going that road, I wanted to hone in on it, and I wanted to, you know, I wanted to be better. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to be a parody act. I wanted to be, you know, kind of hopefully at some point people will look back and be like, you know, he was decent enough at writing.
100%. I think that, and it might. I'm not sure if it's like a demographic thing, a generational thing, based on my age and maybe the exposure to different kinds of music that I've been exposed to then versus maybe those people older or younger. But I think that Kneecap are a really interesting case point for what you just said. We've been lucky enough to have a number of Irish musicians on this podcast. We've had Glenn Hansard, Dermot Kennedy, a handful of others, which I do apologise to them now that I'm trying to list them all. Apologise to them. Nice. But I think it is known in the music community that Irish songwriters, regardless of genre, it is something that is taken very, very seriously. And in my mind, I couldn't even really think of like a novelty act that has come from Ireland when it comes to music, because it is quite a thing. I think that anyone that maybe dismisses Kneecap as something that is a novelty or a parley, as you say, is really not kind of looking hard enough or not really listening to what you're saying. And again, with the aspect of keeping the Irish language alive, that when people kind of say, oh yeah, it's a party trick or whatever, that it almost seems like a little bit like too dismissive in a way, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's the cheesy quote, like, but the caged bird must sing. Do you know what I mean? And I think what happens is after 800 years of colonialism, I think it's kind of it breeds a kind of an artistic kind of look on the outlook on the rest of the world, you know. And I think it's we we had to dance and sing and, you know, through the dark times. I think it goes to any kind of culture that you see in colonialism or any kind of like, you know, downtrodden people. They always like, I mean, the black community in America, you know, like it creates soul. Do you know what I mean? It creates good musicians and people who are, you know, who have a different outlook on life and on art in general.
100%. Have you found in Ireland yourself that the impact of Kneecap as a positive thing? I imagine that the ability to take a number of the native languages in Ireland and take them to the world and for it to be heard and to be taken seriously must be inspiring to a number of musicians, creatives, and even just young people in Ireland as it is to be able to see people doing that for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that a lot of people around the world didn't even know that we had a language here. You know, I mean, we're speaking Irish in Ireland over 2,000 years, and we're speaking English for around 2,500. You know what I mean? So English is still a relatively new concept there. So the fact that, you know, a lot of people didn't know about the Irish language, that I think that's changed. I think most people, I mean, well, a lot more anyway, are aware that we have an Indigenous language here that was driven to almost extinction. And, you know, getting people in the streets or getting messages. We've obviously toured with Miss Kenina and stuff from Australia. And, you know, it's mad how much you end up having in common with people from the other side of the world because they kind of have a shared history with you. It's great now that the amount of people who are, you know, sending their kids to Irish schools. Like my parents didn't speak Irish, so but they sent us to an Irish school, me and my brother, and same with Mowgli and his brothers. But his parents spoke Irish though. You know what I mean? So I think things are changing, and the kind of the outlook people have on the language is changing because there was a lot of shame obviously attached to the language, and I think that's kind of changing now.
I would, only from an outsider's perspective, agree with that. But I think even referencing then Miss Kenina, an incredible talent, friend of this podcast, had her on a number of times. And while I think that obviously she does rap primarily in English, you are starting to see a similar thing here in Australia where First Nations languages in music are being taken more seriously and less of a novelty or less of a I don't want to say the word party trick, but I think, as you said, Pali, I think that it's actually being looked at as, what an incredible piece of history and art.
Yeah, I mean, you could dissect any song of Miss Kenina's and you can see the absolute quality in it. Like Kenina's obviously she's a superstar. Like, so yeah, it's nice. It's nice that people, as you said, obviously the amount of Irish artists that have, you know, come through for years now who have been respected. You know, we've very respected poets and stuff. I think we've always had a lot to offer, and I think finally, and not just in music. I think now with, you know, in movies and stuff now as well. It's like if Cillian Murphy and stuff. I think we're being talked about a lot more in a good way. Do you know what I mean?
100%. I think that Cillian Murphy has been killing it for a number of years, and I know that a number of the young ladies that we hang out with or listen to this podcast seem to. I think there's a big Paul Mescal, you know, recognition across the world as well. But it is definitely an incredible thing to see that obviously people are resonating with the music of Kneecap. And I'm really excited for them to hear this new album when it is out. We'll make sure that there are links in today's podcast for people to be able to listen to the album, buy the vinyl, you know, all that kind of thing. Buy the merch, kneecap.ie, I believe.
Yeah, if you want to save the Irish language, go and buy all our merch.
Exactly. That's what I've been told. Mo, before we kind of wrap things up, we usually ask our guests what they're currently listening to. For yourself, is there anything that's on a high rotation at the moment?
It's actually, funny enough, it's another Don Carey record, the Wet Leg Moisturizer.
Mm-hmm. Great record.
Unbelievable. That's an unbelievable record. That's been on repeat. That's my travel album now. Like anytime I'm getting on a plane or whatever, earphones in, stick that on.
Great record. Absolutely fantastic choice. I am very appreciative for your time today, Mr. Mo Chara. I thank you very much for coming onto the podcast and chatting to us about the brand new Kneecap record. It is called FENIAN. Once again, it's out now for people to listen to and purchase. But thank you for coming to have a chat.
Anytime, mate. Anytime.